My name is George Martinez. I'm a candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives in New York's 7th Congressional District. I'm a New Yorican, a descendant of Puerto Ricans born and raised in New York City. I was born and raised in South Brooklyn, communities that fall within the 7th Congressional District. I'm the first person in my family to graduate high school, child of a single mom. And currently I'm a professor of political science at Pace University. I'm a cultural ambassador for the United States of America for the State Department for the last 6 years, working on track 2 level diplomacy, particularly cultural diplomacy. I am a husband, I'm a father, and I'm the founder and director of a nonprofit organization called the Global Block Foundation, whose mission it is to harness the spirit of activism, innovation, and creativity at the core of the hip-hop movement to inspire young people to become agents of change where they live. And I'm also a member of the Occupy Wall Street movement.
You're a performer as well. I saw you perform hip-hop.
Absolutely.
How long have you been performing?
I've been a hip-hop artist for over 25 years. For me, it's important to be able to start to use music to communicate messages that I thought was important in the realm of hip-hop.
Think of me, I'm free, living my dreams, going no fear of possibilities, cause I know they ain't there. I'm free and I'm ready, occupying the street. This way, nothing ever could be taken from us. Come on! Yeah! Occupy this album.
I decided to run for Congress this year in 2012 for a new seat, literally as a reaction to seeing what was happening in my city, understanding what was happening in our country. I had explored the idea for some time because I understood that our political system is broken. I understood that we needed to get money out of politics and that folks in my community weren't represented well at all. But that wasn't enough to put me over the top to be able to declare my candidacy this year. What really helped me declare my candidacy this year was the police, the abusive police tactics that they started using, not only in my community with normally things like stop and frisk, but when they started beating down peaceful protesters in New York City, in my city. And there seemed to be no political power to put that in check. And I felt like I could do something about that. When I started realizing that Occupy Wall Street was prepared to occupy the SEC, was prepared to occupy the board of directors of corporations who are primarily responsible for the corrosive influence of their corporate dollars in our political process, and began to realize that we cannot just be sick and tired of being sick and tired. And as this movement rolls off as a part of the diversity of tactics, we need to be able to also mobilize and galvanize our strength to be able to affect outcomes of elections, so that those public officials who have been taking the corporate dollars can know that we can hold them accountable. And I encouraged everyone as individuals to be able to bring what your experiences are, your talents, your knowledge, to bear as a tapestry of diversity of tactics. And for me personally, I knew that we needed to start opening the political conversation, start letting folks know that we will not be co-opted. You will not be able to co-opt our language when it's convenient while you're still passing laws that repress the citizenry. And so we decided, after consulting with lots of folks within the movement, to be able to tether a new campaign that's attempting to build a people's machine to compete with the corporate control machines. And we decided to start bum rushing the vote.
Tell me about Bum Rush the Vote. Where did that slogan come from, and what does it mean? I came up with the idea of Bum Rush the Vote, and it basically means when issue literacy meets direct action, we will flash mob the polls and affect outcomes of elections. Mm-hmm. So it's basically how to crowdsource affecting outcomes of elections by mobilizing at a grassroots level the electorate. And the term for me is a form of how we translate through colloquial hip-hop language the need for us to be able to start affecting outcomes of elections, affecting the outcomes of who's deciding who gets what, where, when, and why, which is all things political. So Bum Rush the Vote was a natural fit as part of an urban strategy. This district, which is a new district, we have 4 candidates. I'm one of the candidates. We have an unknown person from who lives in Chinatown, whose name is O'Connor. We have a member of the New York City Council who's part of the Brooklyn political machine called Eric DeLon. And we have another member of the Brooklyn political machine, 20-year congressional incumbent for New York's 12th congressional district, Congressperson Velasquez.
Nydia Velázquez, right?
That's correct.
Recently, you had some problems getting in on the debates at New York 1. What happened with that?
Well, apparently some folks decided that people's voices don't matter. Where people could put me on the ballot, we collected over 3 times as many signatures as was legally required with very little money. We were the 3rd highest signature getter out of 4 candidates with clearly the lowest amount of money raised, because that's the premise of our campaign, to get money out of politics. Well, it turns out that that's not good enough for Time Warner New York 1. It turns out that New York 1 decided that the people's right to put me on the ballot is not more important than my proving how much money I've spent. So they in fact determined that spending money is the criteria for whether or not people would be able to hear our message, and that's absolutely contrary to the premise of our campaign in the first place, and it's absolutely a violation of the spirit of democracy. So we're challenging the premise that that people put me on the ballot, but yet money is keeping me off of a debate is a violation of the spirit of what it means to be an American. They've arbitrarily stated that this is part of their methodology. When folks ask them, well, what's the legal requirement that you all have established as part of your rules and regulations for letting candidates speak, they didn't have an answer. So they've arbitrarily decided that money matters more than people in terms of who should be able to participate in a debate, and they haven't even determined how much money that is legally required for them in the first place. Sounds like a bunch of hogwash to me, and more importantly, it's an affront to the 3,000 people who signed my petition in my district who decided that they wanted a choice on the ballot for the first time in 20 years, where this is the first Democratic primary in 20 years in my community. We were mobilized with folks from the Occupy movement, and it's not because folks have endorsed my candidacy, because Occupy and as an Occupy activist,
right,
we are not looking for Occupy endorsement. But individuals from within the movement who know that getting money out of politics is the central issue rejected what New York 1 had to say outright, and we mobilized in 24 hours what would have been 100+ people outside of their studio, prepared to make the call as I walk in to get me on that show, that debate. It was canceled not for what we're talking about. The debate was canceled for a human tragedy. Congressperson Nydia Velázquez's mother passed the morning of the scheduled debate in the island of Puerto Rico. We, out of respect, called off any protest, any organizing that was going to happen to put pressure on New York 1.
What I am saying is that we bum rush every space, we bum rush every party. This is a nonpartisan movement about reclaiming democracy of real Americans. This is about owning the streets block by block and city by city. It's about developing urban farming initiative strategies so we can have food security happening in the hood, and there's no partisanship to that at all. Yeah! This is about ending police repression, ending things like stop and frisk. I'm not down for managing stop and frisk at all. Oh yeah. This is about reclaiming public spaces when we know that there are empty lots, we know there are empty buildings, we know there are more empty buildings and units than there are homeless people in our city and our country. This is a human problem.
Occupy Wall Street is not a movement of divisive politics. In fact, it is probably one of the most unifying movements that we've seen in 2-3 generations, easily. What happened in Occupy Wall Street, and that some folk in positions of authority who are related to the broken establishment as it is, have negative things to say, I think is a positive for the power of what Occupy Wall Street represents. We do not expect to have friends amongst the 1% who have decided to not be a part of the 100% looking for solutions. So Occupy Wall Street did a phenomenal thing by bringing people together who would normally be separated from each other. And we met in a park called Zuccotti Park. We affectionately call it Liberty Square. Folks got together and we didn't know what was happening. I first went to the park the second week of September, second week of the occupation, skeptical like most folks should be of people getting together and people engaging in the political system. We should be skeptical. And I was in the park looking around, and before you know it, I began to realize that something remarkably different was happening, that there was indeed a space for transformational hopefulness that was growing, and that indeed people from all walks of life were circling in and honing in on a central core theme, which is get money out of politics and put people back in. People are sick and tired of the bank bailouts, the politicians taking money from the lobbyists, crafting legislation that supports the interest of those banks and those lobbyists at the expense of people. That's a singular goal that resonated from Occupy Wall Street. That's the most American goal that we can all aspire to actually promote, and that anyone that has a problem with that, I think that they should call into question their own integrity. Clearly, mainstream news has done a remarkable job at pitting members of the general public against what are activists, in fact. You know, I'm an Occupy Wall Street activist and an organizer, but my organizing and activism predates the event called Occupy Wall Street. Now, I think it's most appropriate that we recognize that the power of labor unions has been augmented by the power of Occupy Wall Street. The Democratic Party, including the President of the United States, is using the 99% language. So we have in fact positively affected the United States of America and positively affected the political narrative in the country.
That's true, because one of the criticisms has been what goals, what concrete goals. They haven't made any specific demands, and there's no concrete goals. And so often that's said in combining people to comparing people to things like the Tea Party.
Right. It doesn't, for me, there's lots of demands in the tapestry of beautiful people. And when people organize and get together, you'll find that there's lots more common ground than things that separate people. So there are lots of social and economic justice demands clearly that are out there. A lot of those demands that are emerging now are coming from actual communities. So folks shouldn't have been surprised when people who got together in a park in Wall Street, in the Wall Street area, which is not representative and not a reflection of real communities, for example, of New York City, shouldn't be surprised when there weren't clear demands being articulated, because that would have been a violation of the spirit of building horizontally in the first place, as a leader-less movement. We were not going to take demands from a centralized space to represent the interest of community members. So that we have gone out into the community to start facilitating that those voices be heard and creating a narrative of the demands from within communities, I think is a power and a testament to the way Occupy Wall Street has dedicated itself to building autonomous structures from within the community. Now, at the same exact time, I think it's also worth noting that we do have a central demand, and it's get money out of politics. We did not organize in Central Park. It was a call on Wall Street to specifically highlight the corrosive influence of corporate dollars in our political process. And it's not anti-corporations per se, and it's not anti-wealthy folk. It is in fact a charge, a call, if you will, to reclaim our democracy that has been bought and sold to the highest bidder. And that was a central core call in the park. It remains a central tenet of what we aspire to be as a movement. And as an individual autonomous actor, I'm participating in an electoral direct action as a member of the movement, but I am not speaking on behalf of the movement by any stretch of the imagination.
How would you put this program into place in Washington?
We are building a political model that basically is a do-it-yourself democracy model. It's open source, it's crowd-funded, and the goal is to tether the horizontal growth of grassroots organizing at a community level as to build a direct democracy engine to be able to help tether my service as a member of Congress back to the preferences of the community, so in real time they can know what I'm doing, what I haven't done, and they should be empowered enough as active citizens and active organizers in the community to be able to start deliberating local problems like a GA.
Would you wear a hoodie in Congress if you were trying to give a speech?
I might.
That happened a few weeks ago and got that politician very much in trouble.
Well, the gentleman in Washington, D.C. wore a hoodie to celebrate Trayvon Martin, right, and the death of Trayvon Martin, and the move against, for example, laws like promoting gun control, and also the stand your ground law in places like Florida that could be used for with racial purposes negatively against members of the community. So he was standing there on principle, and I dare them to escort me out if I am an elected official, if I'm a member of Congress and I'm wearing my hoodie, because I will have hundreds of people outside every day making sure that I'm doing exactly what I'm saying now as a member of Congress. And that's the point of what we're building, a transparent, direct democracy engine that we can rebuild the people's machine to compete with the corporate machine. And if I could get elected, we bring 100 more with us. We start empowering local communities to solve their problems, reducing reliance on government in the first place, while we have our government officials directly connected to our preferences. And if we're not following the preferences of the community, we get voted out in 2 years. It's as simple as that. We empower the people not only to get us elected, but to take us out at the same time. Then we're doing something that's exactly what we're calling attention to, empowering the citizenry to reclaim our democracy.
Obviously, nothing can really happen in the United States Congress without coalitions, and there's a certain amount of respect that has to be paid by people you might not have a lot of respect for because of their seniority and things like that. We know how the Congress works. How would you deal with those kind of problems?
Well, I'm an ambassador, so being diplomatic is par for the course for me. So I'm prepared to work with the distinguished gentlemen and gentlewomen in Congress, even if they're wrong. And we'll help them get right, or they'll get bum rushed. That's a promise. Let's take an integrated approach strategy, because I want folks to begin to realize that we can no longer sustain any positive developments that we have in our community with one-off projects. We can't do it. So let's consider a platform of 0% unemployment and sustainable energy for all, and how that as a core piece of a national conversation plays out locally and tethers into the economic development strategies of neighborhoods, particularly as it relates to small business and local education. So we begin by retrofitting all buildings in our city, beginning neighborhood by neighborhood, for what would become the smart grid technology in the future. We retrofit these buildings to begin to reduce energy consumption and begin to also prepare them for renewable energy production. We do this and we train countless folks in the community to begin to be the retrofitters, the installers, and the maintenance folks for the transition to smart grid electrical technology. We have the capacity now. I have friends who are working from the native indigenous tribes in the Arctic Circle who are now down in Brazil, headed on to Brazil for Rio Plus 20 this week, in fact, who are leading the way on developing the technology that we need in our city to be able to produce our own renewable energy using our natural resources that we have available to us. And in New York City we have solar, wind, and tidal energy that we can start harvesting. We need to start decommissioning our nuclear power plants, but to do that we have to begin to augment the capacity of our infrastructure. As we move forward with that, we'd have folks basically in the community training to become the retrofitters for the environmental piece, while we're also doing environmental remediation, because in communities, for example, like Gowanus, we have the Gowanus Canal, which is one of the most polluted bodies in the country. It's been recently designated as a Superfund site.
Do you support that?
I do not support the designation of the Gowanus Canal as a Superfund site, because what happens is the Superfund site designation puts the trust of the cleanup in a broken federal institution, agency like the EPA in the first place. Even worse, folks for a decade plus, and I grew up on 3rd and Bond, I grew up exactly on the banks of the Gowanus Canal, so I didn't need 10-year federal studies to show how polluted it was, at all. 2 years ago we had developers who wanted to start putting $1 billion+ into remediation of the Gowanus Canal and development of affordable housing. The Superfund designation stopped it cold. So the city lost about $1 billion of development. We lost putting the responsibility for cleaning up the Gowanus Canal on the private corporations that polluted them in the first place. I don't need any federal studies to tell us how polluted it is. What we need are real solutions, not more studies, not a federal agency figuring out a long-term plan for how we start improving this waterway. What we need are people who are focused, and in this case we had developers, we had the city of New York, who were prepared to invest $1 billion in developing the waterfront along the Gowanus Canal, which required that they also had environmental remediation. I see that growing jobs locally, training our community for environmental remediation, energy and green retrofitting of our infrastructure provides jobs for the foreseeable future. And then if we're starting to develop actual buildings for affordable housing constructs and other developments, then we actually now have another layer of work and jobs that are going to be coming in for the foreseeable future. Education.
What's your feeling about the policies that have come out of the mayor's office and of the federal government as far as No Child Left Behind and the testing programs, the way that we're running the school system today?
I'm not surprised that we have a broken education system that comes from a broken political system, so let's be clear about that. New York City, separate from the federal government, has a thing called mayoral control. I'm opposed to mayoral control because we never know what we're going to get. We are encouraging that parents, teachers, aides, and students begin to shape the direction of education policy for themselves. So this would require that New York City move on reducing the amount of mayoral appointees to the panel of education policy. And this is one of the reasons why we decided to bum rush. Let's just bum rush New York City Council in the mayor's race next year and actually transform the entire PEP, the entire Department of Education, to a body that looks like it wants to work with parents, students, and educators to make our system work better for the kids.
What do you think of charter schools?
I think that there are some innovative public schools and public school teachers that have come through the New York City's Teaching Fellow program, for example, and some of these teachers have developed ideas for what are public charter schools. I think some of those ideas are phenomenal and are beautiful. But at the same time, there's the real question about the charter schools and the vouchers, which basically means to me, schools like the Success Academy, means to me that we are ready to start decreasing our funding for public education and weaning it off into private charter schools. I am completely opposed to that. Now we go back to No Child Left Behind. It turns out that the Congressperson Velasquez from New York City, from New York 12, was a voter of No Child Left Behind. And I heard anecdotally that, well, you have to understand, George, you know, that was one of the bills that passed, and you have to understand that this was the educational project of the day. And no, I'm sorry. I don't agree that we have to be complacent with failed policy and we need to be voting on failed policy. Let's have some thought leadership. Every educator knows that testing and teaching toward tests fails our kids. Every educator knows that when we whittle away after school activities, cultural activities, civic engagement activities at the early levels, we are not doing a service to our city by having the best prepared young people be able to lead our city in the future. This is a crisis in our country. This is a crisis for me personally, and I'm dedicated to focusing on empowering schools, neighborhoods, teachers, parents, and students that they can shape their own direction for what they know is best for their education, move bureaucrats out of the way, and stop teaching to the test. We are failing our kids.
Okay, last question. You mentioned Congresswoman Velasquez. Some would say, well, especially in the New York environment, here's somebody who has the connections from their long tenure in Congress to get things for their district, and that you're better off going with the old-timer who's got the connections.
If the benefits of that seniority actually were brought back to our district, that might be relevant. The reality is that after 20 years, folks are still hurting in my neighborhood, in our community. We haven't seen the benefits of whatever folks are taking credit for, whatever votes that Congressperson Velasquez is taking credit for, whatever issues that they would take credit for, we haven't seen the actual tangible benefits to people in our neighborhood. We have communities with some of the highest rates of stop and frisk per capita anywhere in the city. So I'm advocating for federal oversight of NYPD and ending stop and frisk. After 20 years, we don't need a study to tell us that we need to end stop and frisk. I was first stopped and frisked over 20 years ago as a teen before we had a term stop and frisk. So if folks are in Congress for 20 years with seniority for all this time and with all these connections, and we haven't seen a progressive agenda move forward at all that reflects the interest of our community, and we haven't seen the prospects of hope and job creation come back to our neighborhoods, well, we have a problem.
The cases which I've had numerous parents, Nicholas Haywood Sr. and others, whose children were actually killed, have been shot in situations where they really haven't gotten justice, where the New York City Police Department has a tremendous amount of power in protecting its officers from investigations. Do you think that that is a problem?
It is a problem. It's a huge problem. I was actually at the park naming for Nicholas Haywood Park, which is in my congressional district. It's in the Wyckoff section, the Gowanus section of Brooklyn, and I was there when they named the park almost a decade ago at this point. And I'm familiar with the cases like Ramarley Graham in the Bronx, who was unarmed and was killed in his home, in his grandmother's home, in the bathroom. We're familiar with these cases. And what we need is real oversight. We need the police to recognize two things: that they work for the people, and that there's no interest in them covering up the bad apples. As an ambassador for the United States of America, and I work with the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime, and I work with the State Department, particularly NAST, the Narcotics Affairs sections throughout the world, I train police officers and national police officers across the hemisphere on police community relations, and it's a shame when I have to travel with US dollars overseas and show videos of NYPD of what not to do. So I show videos in other countries of NYPD to train other police of what not to do, and that's a shame. And I come back to my city and we're harassed the same as it was when I was a kid, if not worse. We need the police to recognize that they work for us. I'm calling on the police because I respect the job that they do, but I'm calling on them to stop protecting the bad apples. When a good cop does something accidental and they get covered up by the wall of blue, we just helped a good cop become a bad cop by now being part of the conspiracy against the people. We need police to live up to their obligations. They are sworn officers to the Constitution of the United States. They are not sworn allegiance to captains or white shirts who would otherwise send them to commit illegal acts of law enforcement. We want them to stand up for truth, for justice, for the dignity of what it means to be American. We want folks to stop pulling their guns out first in low-income communities. That's not the tactic that we want. We want folks to stop harassing and sending the chill down the young people's spine, but we also need to start inviting police to smile again. Smile again. Walk in the neighborhood and smile again. Remember what it meant to be a person from the neighborhood, a person who cares about the interest of everybody, and remember that everyone has the same interest. We need to figure out a better way to have folks work together. We need folks to be, we need a lot of folks to go. A lot of people who have the institutional memory of an outdated policing model need to be gone, and we need to give these young officers a chance to become the best they can be as law enforcement officials and as public safety servants of us, the people of New York City.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Any last words, just a few words to end up?
Please get involved where you live. Please get involved in the tapestry of diversity of tactics as we affect change. Bum Rush to Vote supports getting money out of politics. My name is George Martinez. You can find us at bumrushtovote.net, Twitter, Bum Rush to Vote. All day, all week, we occupy all streets. Peace.